Okay, my name is Risper Ohaga and I'm the Group CFO at East African Breweries PLC. I've been there for the last 4 years in that capacity. Prior to that, I was with Barclays for 11 years. We're just talking about my career. Coming into accounting was more of a challenge from my dad. One, I loved maths a lot and I didn't know quite how to make money with it. And so he was like, do medicine. I didn't really like blood and things like that. And then he told me, well, the CPAs are really hard, you won't make it. And so that I said, well, let's see if I can prove you wrong. And so I ended up, when I finished high school, I ended up enrolling with Strathmore. I just interviewed. Dad didn't have any money, but they gave me a part scholarship. So he just needed to raise 10,000 for me to get in and start doing my CPAs, which he did. And that's how I got into accounting. By the time I was going into university, I'd nearly finished my professional accounting exams. So varsity was easy. I could work and still get good grades. And it was a good time to also grow up. Did a few internships, spent a bit of time at Unga, spent a bit of time at Total, doing accounting type jobs, just getting to grips with it. And then when we finished, the audit firms typically come to recruit from varsity. And they came, and I remember that year KPMG had been trying to expand their presence as a global firm in Kenya. So they came first before the other firms. They interviewed us, and what I remember clearly was after the interviews, you get to talk to the people who left varsity and worked with them. And I did that with all the firms that came, and what struck me about KPMG was just how much responsibility and growth people were getting, and how happy they were to work there. And so for me, that was a big win in terms of deciding to where to go. So I joined KPMG, stayed there for 9 years, loved it. Had my kids also right from the outset. I got my firstborn in my first year of working. And so I've done being a career mom throughout, so I did 9 years. After that, Barclays called me for a role. They were trying to grow their internal audit function after the financial crisis in 2008. And previously they did a lot of the work offshore, but now they wanted presence on the ground. So they talked to me initially, I said no. They expanded the role, talked to me again, and I had a conversation with Aidan, who was the MD, and he was so convincing I decided to move across. So Barclays was great, really challenging, really global. You start to really see yourself globally. You're always benchmarked globally. You have to discuss global issues. And a big part of it was me building African talent, which is something I enjoyed, getting the team to be one that people admire. So I did that 3 years in Kenya. I was taking care of East and West Africa. After 3 years, I challenged my then group chief internal auditor to ask him, why would an African not get the Africa role? Because it used to be mainly expatriates would come and use it as a training ground for their future careers. So I just asked him what would it take for someone like me. And he looked shocked because I had just had a baby 2 years before. And while I was doing a great job, he didn't think in his mind that I would want to move. But then once I had that conversation, it turned out it was at the same time they're thinking about restructuring and moving the role into Africa, to be located in Africa instead of Dubai. Yeah, and immediately asked him that question. The conversation became an interview. And from there, later I was being told everybody who was interested in the role was told to stand down because they found their candidates, just because I asked. And that meant moving to South Africa. Tough conversations with the family. My husband had been working for Bamburi. He was heading their sales nationally. And yeah, we took the leap and decided to pick up everything and go to Johannesburg. Did Johannesburg for 4 years, initially taking care of the countries outside South Africa, the 10 countries. Developed that quickly. Within months, my boss expanded my portfolio to include the retail bank in South Africa, which is big. And even then, again, just building on mainly getting good leaders who then are able to build strong teams. So took that on, enjoyed it. And in my final year, I started to think whether I wanted to stay in South Africa long term. Because when you have a big business, you tend to specialize. And that makes it difficult to come back home. And so I thought about it. We decided no, we wanted to come back home, so where's a path towards home? So I asked for a secondment into finance, went to Mozambique on a project. For about 6 months I was commuting from Joburg, and at the end of it I was offered finance director for Zambia. The initial plan was to come to Kenya, but obviously timing also is a factor. So I was offered Zambia. We moved again with the family to Zambia. My eldest remained in school in Johannesburg, and the rest moved with me to Zambia, which was really great experience. It's a very friendly environment. It's a small country, few people, but very nice people. So we enjoyed that. It was a tough time economically. All the stuff we're going through here, currency depreciation, inflation, all the pressures we're going through now were happening at the time. So it was a big learning for me. I had to qualify as an accountant in Zambia, never mind having qualified elsewhere, which meant I had to do exams in law and tax within 6 months and pass them. And my boss kept telling me, if you fail, we're sending you right back. And in those 6 months also put in a new system, an accounting system. So quite some challenges there, but very exciting. And then after 4 years, wanting again to come home, because you get 2-year increments, and again wanting to come back home. Barclays was converting into ABSA, and they still didn't have a rule of the right level in Kenya. So the only proposition was, can we take you back to South Africa? So as we're discussing, then I got a call from EABL looking for a finance director, and we hit it off immediately. Interviews were completed very quickly, and within a few short days we were here. Very fortunate because we signed up and were here before COVID, just before COVID. We landed here on 31st December, just before 2019, just before COVID, and then started the job 1st February. So that's where I've been with EABL, shifting from banking, 11 years of banking and 9 years of consulting, into FMCG, which the major difference is just how big the power of brands and branding is. Yeah, so that's sort of the journey. I think for me it's always the people. And if I think about Barclays, for instance, when I joined, the people in the audit team were, if we didn't really want you, then we put you over there. And so it wasn't the place to be. And also globally, the narrative was that, we don't have talent in Africa. So for me, a big thing was demonstrating that actually we do. And not only do we have talent, I used to tell the team that we want to be the team that everybody wants to come and work for, because we are having fun, we are delivering above and beyond, and everything we do is something to be admired. And I think we achieved that. By the end of the term, people were asking what's going on there. Can we go to Kenya? Can we go to East Africa? And I think throughout, for me, that's the biggest thing. It doesn't come in big increments, but it's, you meet somebody and they're here and you work with them, and you get out their potential and their leadership. So I think for me, the biggest part of my role, other than that it's dynamic, every few years I'm switching and doing something different. It's just that I have the opportunity to impact a lot of people through my leadership. So one of the most comforting things, last month I had a detailed conversation on my career journey, on my journey from infancy up to where I am now, with a group of leaders at Executive Connect. And I brought my daughter with me and my husband as well. And rather than answer that question, I asked her to answer whether she felt that the outcomes would have been different if we didn't make the choices that we did. And her feedback was that it was tough sometimes, but she wouldn't have had it any other way. So I think that for me was quite affirming coming from her. Of course, there are sacrifices, like that, having to leave her in boarding school. When my second born, we were moving to Kenya, she had to move to South Africa and stay there until she finished last year. So now we were in Kenya, and she was it's a longer commute from South Africa. So they've had to grow up real quick, be independent, learn to travel by themselves, and adapt to different environments. And while sometimes it's tough, I think it's also prepared them for life as young adults. They're very independent. They're able to plug and unplug into different environments. And at the same time, because of moving like that, we are actually quite close as a family. So on a typical weekend or holiday, you find us together, we hang out together, which I think is a nice thing. Yeah, so there are challenges, but I always think to myself that I don't know what the alternative would have been. So I don't know if it would have been better. So I take what I get and I'm grateful for it. I think for me, I don't know whether I always see it in a gender lens, though of course there is a gender lens to it. But the way I think about it is really, one, investing in yourself. Your foundation has to be strong. Yeah, you have to know your stuff. There's no substitute for knowing your stuff. That when you know your stuff, that really gets you to the table, because you can't have conversations where you don't have content. And then on top of that, you now have to work through your soft skills, really being able to influence, being able to lead, being able to have tough conversations. And so you're constantly investing in yourselves. I don't know that I can pick. I guess it's harder inevitably, because you are having kids, raising them, and so navigating all of that is bound to be quite challenging, because you're almost doing a day job and a night job. But having a support system has really helped. I've always had really great help. When I moved to SA and to Zambia, I went with my help from here, put her into college, and we stuck together through it all. Also, my husband, him having stepped back from his role, he had a good corporate role and he stepped back to support, isn't something that is done here, or even if it's done, it's not talked about. But I think he always reminds me that it's about this family unit, what's the right thing for it, and if we're doing the right things for our family, then we push on. I think also sometimes just when you've done the work and you're confident in your values, you just push through. And I also believe being affirmed at an early age by my dad means I don't question myself too much. I think the toughest points have been either points of integrity, where there's a point on the table and there's a temptation to not do the right thing. I tend to think sometimes I'm very black and white about such things. And we had Martin Odor this last weekend talking to us about his career journey. And I was telling him I read his book and I was like, there's some battles it was the good fight. Why did you allow it not to happen? And he was saying it's about choosing the long game. What's the long game? And I realized sometimes I've gone for the immediate battle that has to be won on the grounds of, integrity. So I think that's a big one, usually, because I'm quite, is it the right thing to do? If it is, why are we debating? Yeah, so I don't know necessarily. Maybe there are some stereotypes. I remember going to Zambia as well, and there's an executive team WhatsApp group, and there was a conversation around Joyce Banda and how she knelt. She was kneeling in front of some other president, and I kind of made an offhand comment like, I only kneel before God. Didn't quite understand Zambian culture, which was really most of the guys had their wives kneeling before them daily. So that was incidentally quite offensive. And the next day there was a video, the famous video of Lucy Kibaki storming and telling the husband, tell them. And they were like, yeah, this is your new CFO. This is how Kenyan women are. So some of those is just being culturally aware and realizing, whoa, maybe that wasn't how to get into this conversation in this context. Is then also realizing that there are gender differences here, and you're not going to win by hitting your head against the wall. You have to find a way to navigate without making the other person feel undermined, but still getting your point across.